Hey, welcome back to Review Crew. I'm Owen.
I'm Cameron.
And today we're watching Tenet. Check out the trailer.
All I have for you is a word. Tenet. It'll open the right doors, some of the wrong ones too. Use it carefully.
To do what I do, I need some idea of the threat we face.
As I understand it, we're trying to prevent World War III.
I'm not saying Armageddon here.
No. Something worse.
I gather you have an interest in a certain Russian national.
Might just bring me in.
You really want to know? He can communicate with the future.
Time travel.
No. Inversion.
Aim it and pull the trigger. You're not shooting the bullet, you're catching it.
Whoa. Well, I've seen too much.
Well, we'll try and keep up.
Your duty transcends national interests. This is about survival.
Seems bold.
Bold, I'm fine with. I thought you were going to say nuts.
This is where our worlds collide.
How would you like to die?
Old.
You chose the wrong profession.
Well, that from here.
Hasn't happened yet.
There are people in the future who need us. We need Tenet.
We need to save them here and now.
This reversing the flow of time. Doesn't us being here now mean it never happened? You want to crash a plane?
But not from the air. No one's so dramatic.
Well, how big a plane?
That part is a little dramatic.
All right, so Tenet. What were your first impressions? What did you like? What did you not like?
Well, first impression, right when you get that end credit, that first end credit, you're just kind of a sigh of, not relief, but, it's like being on a 2-hour roller coaster through, like, Christopher Nolan's creative mind. That's, like, the culmination of all of his movies. It kind of definitely feels like his, like, master work, and almost like, that's what I thought right when I left the theater. I thought, like, wow, Christopher Nolan really didn't care, but almost didn't take into mind, like, the difficulties of following the plot and some of the difficulties in the movie in general. And he said he didn't care about any of that. He's done all of that before, where he's taken so much time describing out these, crazy universes that you're put into. And I think he literally just said, no, I want to focus this entire movie on the nonstop action, the nonstop just world of Tenet, and he doesn't really give a lot of consideration to the viewer on that first watch. But I think that was my first takeaway right when I walked out of that theater, definitely.
Yeah, I had similar sentiments. I mean, I felt like every question that was answered in the movie brought about 2 more questions or 10 more questions or an infinite, just amount of confusion. And yeah, this was definitely a different sort of complexity in terms of like time travel in Christopher Nolan, which is a common aspect of his films. I mean, in Inception and Interstellar. You had different just ways that you move through time, and I mean, this one, it was as if we're not supposed to understand fully, and I think it was made abundantly clear in the movie because the protagonist's name, John David Washington, is the protagonist. He never really gets a name or a backstory, which, you know, I have mixed feelings about because Nolan was trying to make every scene so intense and so grandiose. We didn't really see a lot of character development. Yeah. And I mean, part of that was just the nature of this movie. But a lot of it, I mean, it just made it hard to follow. Yeah. And I couldn't really connect per se with some of the characters. I don't know. What do you think?
So I think you're totally right there. And I think a great thing to talk about first is the characters. Robert Pattinson, John David Washington. Don't honestly know any of the other actors' names, but some familiar faces between, the higher-ups in the TENET organization and John David Washington's kind of, female interest in the movie. They never really even end up... Do you remember her name?
Kat, I think.
Kat. And, they had some great performances, but this isn't really a movie about the characters. And it's not about seeing a character at the start and seeing how the plot changes the character. John David Washington doesn't exactly change at any point in this movie. He's almost like a super generic, almost like a stale James Bond with no charisma or character. They give him a couple of lines here and there that are somewhat funny, almost more awkward, I'd say, given like the rest of the movie. And, at first I had trouble seeing that, and I'm like, Christopher Nolan, this dude that, did what? Dark Knight, Inception, Interstellar, all with like such lovable characters. And I was like, what's going on here? And then I just realized it's literally intentional. They call him the protagonist because he's this super generic protagonist, and everyone in the entire movie is telling him, you're the protagonist. And that has to deal with the, time situation that we'll get into in a little bit. But I thought it was very interesting how Nolan disregarded character arc and character plots and went fully for, kind of just this movie that's like testing the limits of like a single man who doesn't like know what he's doing and is the protagonist for whatever reason, and he's just kind of this generic movie hero in a not so generic plot with a lot of things going on that we've never seen before. But that's the thing. I think he was focusing on the cinematic things he wanted to do, and the character isn't the important part. So he doesn't want it to be some, Heath Ledger Joker type character, or like, even a Leonardo DiCaprio or someone like that who steals away just so much with how great of a character they were and what their character was like in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about a movie that's not about the destination or the characters, it's strictly about the journey. And that journey we saw through the protagonist's eyes, who seems just as lost as we are throughout the entire thing. And so let's talk a little bit about the time, because that is the most confusing aspect about this movie. Can we briefly
explain what the concept is?
Yeah, so basically John David Washington, the opening scene, he is thrust into this role of saving the world, basically. He passes a test of loyalty. He doesn't give up his colleagues, and so this organization, TENET, decides he is going to be the person to save the world. He gets this kind of like side mission, separate from everybody else in the organization, and it's to stop World War III. And we have our main antagonist, Andre, who is this guy. They later explain that he is dying of pancreatic cancer. It's incurable, and he wants to take everyone else down with him.
Actually, probably the most developed character in the entire film is this character, Andre. Before you realize his intentions as the main antagonist, you first see how that relates back to his relationship with his wife. When she left him, he said if he can't have her, no one can. He doesn't really love her, but he just can't think of the thought of her leaving him, you know? And that's why he ends up framing her, and that's how John David Washington ends up getting involved with her, because she's basically a hostage to him and can't really leave his life because they have a child together. And that then relates into the later plot of him not being able to not live in the world if everyone else is still enjoying it. And because he's just this power-hungry, greedy man. I think he's an arms dealer, right? And he just can't bear thinking that he's done and everything's going to go on without him.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a crazy concept for a antagonist that, honestly, I haven't really seen in a movie. Just like a normal, like, billionaire-type guy in a world who gets a terminal illness and decides everyone else is going to die with me.
Yeah, I mean, the scariest kind of villain is one who doesn't have a reason for being evil. And, I mean, when we got introduced to this guy, he seemed like a Thanos-esque supervillain who just wanted to, you know, destroy the world. But even Thanos had a reason for it, some kind of underlying motivation. Andre is just basically saying, screw it.
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm going to take everyone else down with me. And so getting into a bit of the time, each character who is going through the movie that we are following, we're following the linear plot of these characters as they move forward through time. And TENET, being the palindrome that it is, that title is reflected in the plot of the movie. There are characters and pieces of the movie that move backwards through time, which led to some awesome action sequences, some of the best action I've seen in any movie.
Definitely.
And yeah, I mean, the limited special effects was really crucial, I think, to the cinematography of this movie. I mean, the stunts were incredible. The visual effects, everything was just great.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the best cinematic experiences really ever in a movie theater.
Definitely visually. You know, it kind of just goes along with what we talked about at the beginning. Christopher Nolan almost was disregarding the plot and stuff and almost said, I want to do Inception, but with even cooler stuff. You know, because the visuals Inception, we got some crazy, just once in a decade type shots that you just don't see in any other movie from any other filmmaker. You know, you got the Inception shots of all of London, I think it is, folding over itself. And, you know, there's nothing as maybe grandiose in Tenet, but it's constant and it's always, and it's like every scene you're seeing an action stunt that you have never seen before.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever seen a scene where two people are fighting. One of them is fighting backwards in time and the other one is fighting forwards. I mean, like I said, it was confusing, but
and to
awesome.
Then watch that fight in reverse direction. You watch a fight in this movie where John David Washington is fighting forward through time against someone that's fighting the fight backwards through time against him. And then about an hour, maybe 45 minutes later into the movie, you see the same exact fight and find out that the person he was fighting is actually himself going backwards through time. Yeah. So then you're watching him fighting himself, and now his previous self is the one fighting backwards.
Yeah.
And he's fighting forwards. And everything you saw that looked so strange in the first fight, that was backwards, you're now seeing acted out in forwards, and you're seeing how the prior version was doing it backwards when it was forwards. It's just
a
ridiculous.
tongue twister.
It's ridiculous.
And I mean, yeah, like you said, we see our protagonist fighting himself, going forward in time, but that person who he was fighting himself. It's tough for me to explain this in a way that makes sense and doesn't just sound like gibberish. But it was
There's really no way to describe the time aspect of this movie without seeing it, because I don't yet understand it fully, and everywhere I've looked doesn't really have too much of a clearer idea. You know, basically it all revolves around this machine.
Yeah, which is split up into, I think, 9 separate parts that are scattered throughout the world. And Andre is the first one to discover, just kind of stumble upon, in the Soviet Union, one of these time machine parts. And if all 9 pieces are assembled, then time travel will be possible, and that'll just be, destruction, absolute destruction. And so...
what was really cool was that they mentioned that the second Andre first used one of the time travel machines, that creates like infinite like loops and backwards paths for like everything. And apparently every single object has 2 different types of entropy, like going forward and backwards. So right when he first used the time travel machine, it created all of these future realities that were possible where there is time travel. And that's why the reason Tenet came about is because they started finding objects that were from the future, that were sent back in time, that seemed like old, like remnants of like a war that was yet to come. And that's how they figured out about everything. So I think that's so cool that, right when the possibility of time travel does open, you start getting all these things from the future coming back from the past, which makes sense, but like obviously doesn't at all.
I mean, but it doesn't make sense,
like I couldn't scientifically say like why that makes sense, but
in the movie it does make sense that things are choppy because this time travel hasn't been perfected. All the 9 pieces aren't assembled completely, so but from a viewing perspective, it is a little bit frustrating to have the plot just keep going, which is a little bit confusing, and just not being able to follow it step for step. You're always kind of 3 steps behind Christopher Nolan. So overall, what would you rate this movie if you had to?
Overall, the thing is, it is such a fantastic movie, and it's so unique, but I could say here and now and a million times again, it will never come close for me to Dark Knight, Inception, or Interstellar. Like, not even close for me. There's just, there's nothing... There was no emotional pull in the movie. I didn't really care about John David Washington. I cared more about Robert Pattinson just because it's Robert Pattinson, but I also didn't really care about his character. It's not Leonardo DiCaprio or Joseph Gordon-Levitt or, Christian Bale in Dark Knight or Dark Knight Rises or... Matthew McConaughey. It's just not even on the same ballpark as much of a character arc or anything. So I'd still probably give it like a 7 or an 8 based on just how awesome it was, just how unique it was. We've never seen shots and stuff like that on the big screen. So but I wouldn't put it close to any of his others.
I agree with you. And I think to an extent this is a one-of-a-kind movie. I mean, but like you said, emotionally, I didn't connect as much as some of his other movies. So I'd probably say an 8, just because it was awesome. I mean,
it was.
It was a great movie to watch, and something I'll never forget. Definitely a worthwhile theater experience.
For sure.
We'll be right back after the break. Well, that's all for this week. If you want to follow more Review Crew content, go to the Review Crew Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, as well as Orange TV Network on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, and YouTube.
Find the Review Crew's podcast on Spotify or on our website at orangetvnetwork.syr.edu, where you can also find our blog and more OTN information.
See you next week.